Hi, it's Webb from Hi Barr. Thanks for listening to You Had to Be There. After 8 episodes, we wanted to ask you, were you there? Do you know someone who attended one of the moments we've covered on the show? If so, we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch by emailing us or reaching out on social media. Our email and social handles are in the show notes, or go to highbarmedia.com. Also, did you know we have a weekly newsletter? Each Friday, we curate vintage interviews with icons from the past. You can get the newsletter in your inbox for free. Just go to highbarmedia.com and subscribe. It's also linked in our show notes. That's all I've got for now. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate it. Okay, play our music.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
It's one small step for man.
One eyewitness. One major pop cultural event. You Had to Be There uncovers stories that shed light on our most iconic moments.
Like the real enemy.
Each week, a different host takes on the task of finding and interviewing one person within 48 hours who was there, with no idea what their event will be. Come join the ride.
Monahan, it's Webb from Hi Barr. You Had to Be There is to find an eyewitness who was at the 1979 NCAA basketball championship game between Indiana State and Michigan State, featuring basketball gods Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. Starting now, you have 48 hours to find someone who was there, whether they were on the court, bench, announcers, in the arena. It doesn't matter, and interview them. Good luck and have fun.
Where did the game take place?
Salt Lake City in March of 1979. Larry Bird played for Indiana State, the Sycamores, and Magic played for Michigan State.
The Spartans. Yeah, they were the sort of favorites, right?
Yeah.
Didn't Magic pull it out at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, it took place in Salt Lake City. I'll hit you back when I have some more things to share.
Perfect.
Basketball. I don't even like sports.
Perhaps I should tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Monahan. Most of my life I've been called a street rat, half a bum, but I take great pride in the fact that I've never really had a quote-unquote serious job. And let me tell you, that's no easy thing when you weren't born with a silver spoon lodged in your cheek. Where do I come from? I was proudly born and raised in Seattle's Central District, the CD as we call it. Seatown's historically black working-class neighborhood where my sister and I definitely stood out as the palest little freckle-faced, pink-skinned kids on our block. We were like a walking advertisement for Ireland. The CD gave us our values and our personality, and I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Speaking of the world, I got the opportunity to see a lot of it because I somehow was a professional skateboarder for a minute, and somewhat of a skate vagabond. I spent years floating around different continents, crashing on people's couches. Pure luck, if I'm honest. And as that life wore out its welcome, I ended up in Brooklyn, now a washed-up ex-pro skater, where I've been scraping by, figuring out how to make movies with the most minuscule of budgets with my partner Sheena. I think that about sums me up, so let's get back to the task at hand. Bird and Magic. Oh shit, it's Jules.
Hey!
I'm recording you. Is that all right? Am I allowed to record you?
Yeah.
I have your permission?
You have my permission.
Quick question. Am I allowed to curse on this thing? Because I have a filthy mouth.
Jules is the other producer on this podcast, and a dear old friend who wrote me into doing this thing in the first place. So for those of you keeping score, that's why I'm asking them if I can let the stray F-bomb loose every once in a while.
Yeah, you can curse on this. So what did you get?
I got the 1979 NCAA final basketball game between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird.
How do you feel about it?
I mean, I hate sports, but
You hate basketball?
I have an interesting relationship with sports, considering that my deadbeat dad, who was never around, was a professional athlete for all of one season. He was a baseball player. He played for the Mets. I think he was only in the big leagues for one season, but was like a AAA player for a long time. And even though he was never around, he would always somehow contact my mother when he wasn't paying child support, but would offer the advice that I needed to be in Little League. That's probably why I became a skateboarder.
Do you have any like fun people you're gonna call?
Well, my sister is friends with Bill Walton's niece.
I have no idea who Bill Walton is.
He was like the Larry Bird before Larry Bird.
Oh, okay.
The Great White Hope before the Great White Hope. Another lanky, sort of awkward white guy that could play basketball. I think this is the most watched basketball game ever or something.
This is gonna be a good one.
I tried my old buddy Mike a few more times, but kept getting voicemail. It was the middle of the day, so he was probably at work. He's responsible. He has a real job, not a bum like me. Even has grandkids, so he's not playing around. I decided to call Morocco instead. Hit up my sister who was out there rug hunting, probably getting hustled in those Marrakesh souks.
Lily, where are you at? Are you still in Morocco?
I'm in Barcelona.
Wow, jet setting.
And then I quickly explained that I was doing a podcast challenge and that time was ticking.
You have a friend who may be able to help and point me in the right direction. Basically, they asked me to find somebody who was at the final game of the 1979 NCAA championship match between Magic and Bird. The famous one where they first competed against each other.
So it might be my friend Harmony's uncle.
Bingo. That's exactly why I was calling halfway around the world. See, Lily, my little sis, is real tight with Harmony, and Harmony is Bill Walton's niece, the big red deadhead, basketball Hall of Famer and world-famous color commentator.
When you were in that Boston Garden when Larry was playing, and those fans would stand and chant in unison, Larry, 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 because he was the most popular guy, just an icon, just an idol.
If I could speak to him, he'd definitely know someone who was at the Magic Bird matchup, but I was still going to have to play it cool. You know how celebrities are.
I can send it to Harmony and say, I hate to ask you, but this is my brother's been assigned, and you're the only person I can think of that might have a connection through Bill.
Yeah.
While I was waiting for Bill Walton to call me back, I decided I'd hit up my old homie, Dan Cherry. We've been friends since the late 90s when we were both writing for this free hip-hop magazine called Frank 151. Dan soon went on to much bigger things, superstar in the business and entertainment world. He has major sports luminaries on speed dial, like he used to kick it with Pele. Yeah, Dan Cherry, he could be my secret weapon. But he texted me back and said he was in some meeting in Munich? Whatever they call it. Said he'd get back to me later. Patience, grasshopper. So I thought, since I was busy trying people from all corners of the planet, why not hit up my mom's in the meantime? Because she was in Australia at the moment, and the sun was just about to rise there.
Hi.
So you can speak quietly?
I'll go in the bathroom in just a second.
Can I talk to you while you're going to the bathroom?
No. I said I'm going into the bathroom so that I don't wake anybody up.
You're not going to go to the bathroom?
No, I won't go to the bathroom while I'm talking to you because that's gross.
Okay, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm actually recording this right now. This is for a podcast, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't embarrass you.
I hope this part's not being recorded.
No, it is. The whole thing's being recorded. Anyway, Mama, what's up? I have a very important question.
I quickly explained my mission. NCAA championship, Magic Bird, how I had to find someone who was physically at the showdown.
Now, I was only, 9 years old? And that year, when the Sonics won the championship, you let us all sneak out of school, right, and you took us to the parade. I'm going to talk to Mike Clark later, and for sure it's still the best day of his life. Anyway, I know that you were somewhat of a basketball fan because you allowed us to do that, or maybe you were just a Seattle fan because Seattle finally did something remarkable for once.
No, I was a big basketball fan, and I still am.
It's true, my mama was, is, and will probably always be a b-ball fan, but she didn't know anybody who was at the game and didn't have any leads whatsoever. Airball. Oh snap, DC3 is buzzing me. Dan Cherry, my mega-connected main man, probably at some Adidas business meeting drinking Weiss beer at a Hofbrauhaus.
Monahan, what's going on?
What's up? Dan Cherry III. What are you doing in Germany?
You must be a good friend. You call me about something random. I have no idea what it's about, but I'm on the phone.
See, this is why I love you. And you'll see. This could be very important. It could be very unimportant. But you're helping, and that's the most important.
You're my man, so that's the most important thing. I'm in Germany for work.
Yeah, for Adidas? Are you still working with Adidas?
Yes.
All day I dream about skateboarding. Anyway, that was a plug. So yeah, check it out. I've been asked to do this podcast, and basically as the host, I have 48 hours to find somebody who was physically present at the NCAA 1979 championship between Michigan State and Indiana State, where Magic roasted Bird. And it's crazy because I was, 9 years old at the time? You were probably not even born yet? You were a baby.
I was a baby.
I don't know. How are we going to find somebody that was there? I mean, Bird and Magic are still around, but it doesn't need to be somebody famous. It could be a janitor. It could be the person who swept up the confetti. It could be the guy who handed the scissors to Magic to cut the net. So I'm just putting the feelers out. And of course, I thought, you know what? My smartest friend is Dan Cherry. He knows about sports and he's smart. You have a Rolodex like nobody's business. You have the connections.
So you need someone anybody who's physically present.
Yeah.
Physically present at the game in the arena.
Yeah, they had to be there.
Okay.
They could have been selling popcorn, hot dogs.
I'll try to find someone. Okay. I got you.
Let me reiterate.
Yes.
The time is ticking. Those sands are falling through the hourglass.
Okay.
So if you can think of anybody, the good thing is it's nighttime where you're at. It's still daytime over here. So
correct. All right. So I will ask somebody got from ESPN and see.
Of course he knows people at ESPN. Dan motherfucking Cherry the Third. Yes.
Who's next? Let's go south of La Frontera. I'm gonna call my pool skating buddy, because pool skaters usually know people in weird places. Places like Utah. Wes Wesenheimer in Ciudad de Mexico. I've known him since we were skate vermin in our early teens.
What up?
Wes Wesenheimer.
What's your gig, Gary?
The gig is this.
And I proceeded to explain the gig. I told Wes that I needed to find somebody who was at this famous matchup, and most likely this person was in the state of Utah.
Salt Lake is a tough one for me because I don't really know people there. Fuck Utah. So
anyway, I gotta track somebody down. Oh, by the way, I'm recording this. I hope you're all right with that.
Yeah, aren't I supposed to give my permission ahead of time?
Yeah, but as long as you say it's okay, then it's fine. Ernst used to live there. I'm trying to get a hold of him, but he's out gallivanting somewhere, or he's operating on a gun wound or something.
Ernst, another skate nerd from Seattle. He had recently lived in SLC, but was notoriously hard to reach on account of his always being out on the prowl, often in time zones that didn't even fall on the hour. Just remember the name, Ernst, because he'll be popping up later. Anyway, back to Wes.
So you don't have any ideas of Salt Lake City people?
I don't, but, my brother was playing pro soccer in 79.
Yeah. So there's a chance that maybe he knows somebody who worked for NBC. He knows
something.
Dick Musburger or what? No, it's Brent Musburger.
Brent Musburger. So Larry Bird played for the Celtics, and who is it? Magic Johnson?
Yeah.
Playing for LA.
You do know about basketball. Unbelievable.
But what's the Salt Lake City connection? That's the part I don't get.
This was the NCAA championship.
Oh, God.
When they were still in college. Right. The two best players in the league.
Yep.
Head to head. And it's, it's also the fucking U.S. bullshit. The Great White Hope. The fucking racists who are out there watching it. The people that never watched basketball in their life probably watched basketball for this match for fucked up reasons,
right.
So
right.
There's all that too. Anyway, this is eons ago, 43 years ago. And it's still the most watched basketball NCAA game ever.
Oh, really?
And I have to find somebody who had to be there. So,
yeah, but nobody was there.
Yeah, there was some people there. I watched a little bit of the thing on YouTube and...
Somebody was there. Somebody was there.
Everybody had haircuts like people from Linwood. I've never seen so many, corny-looking white dudes at a basketball game in my life.
Okay, let me pause for a second. During this episode, because I'm talking to old friends from Seattle, I'm going to probably be bringing up places like Linwood, Montlake Terrace, Edmonds. These are the northern suburbs of the city, which were full of dudes that looked like they came out of that movie Dazed and Confused. Long feathered hair, bell bottoms, listening to guitar solo heavy stoner rock. Macho assholes driving around in souped up Trans Ams, trying to run us skateboarders, punk rockers, and inner city kids over. Wheels screeching to the tune of Blue Oyster Cult as they screamed homophobic epithets at us. That's what I'm referring to when I bring up Linwood, Edmonds, Mount Lake Terrace, Alderwood.
Okay, so how about this? Nels Grefstad went to Purdue, which is in Indiana, which is where Larry Bird's from.
Yeah, Larry Bird played for Indiana State, the team he was on when he lost.
Right, but Nels is tall.
Nels is tall.
What about the stoner dude who fucking calls games now? He used to play for Oregon. He's Bill Walton.
That's who I was trying to get a hold of. My sister is best friends with his niece. But I wrote to her and she wrote me back. Her name's Harmony Walton. And she told me Bill said that he was already in the big leagues by then. So he doesn't know anything about NCAA at that time. So no luck there. He's not going to help you. Maybe if I told him I was a deadhead first and then I wiggled that angle, it might have worked a little bit better.
Didn't I see you at the Dead in Seattle in '88, right before Jerry died?
Still, yeah, that would have worked.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to call Nels. Okay, talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks for all the help.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Later.
Nels is another skateboard friend.
So I called Nels, and while he is still very tall, he was completely useless when it came to this challenge. Only thing he could offer was single-handedly dispelling the myth that all tall people have magic basketball powers. Hold up, wait a minute. Just received a text message back from Ernst, the other Seattle skate rat we all knew. The guy whose name I told you to remember. Total germaphobe. Was afraid of even stepping foot into a hospital when we were kids for fear he'd catch a disease and die. When he'd roll an ankle landing funny off a jump ramp or handrail, he'd just wait the injury out, which is supremely ironic because now he works in hospitals. Yep, his wanderlust and desire not to have to clock in that many days in the month outweighed his fear of life-threatening microscopic viruses and bacterias. So at the ripe age of 43, he went to school in Salt Lake City to become a doctor. The one I said was out gallivanting somewhere or operating on a gun wound, his medical specialty, well, I was right. He was gallivanting, currently in Kathmandu, where it was still in the middle of the night.
It's 4 a.m., so he's hoping to get a little bit more sleep. Should be aware of what time it is in Kathmandu, but I'm not, because I don't know the world clock. Oh, wait. Jules is calling me. Let me see what they want. Jules.
What's the hot take?
I'm about to call my oldest friend and see if he has any leads. He's a basketball fanatic. He'll help contextualize everything because he's one of the smartest and most sports knowledgeable people I know.
What's their name?
Mike Clark.
Cool. Mike Clark.
I've known him since I was like 6 years old. Crazy.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
So how's the day been going?
It's been going. I still don't have a lead, but I got very close.
What was the lead?
I can't tell you yet.
Okay, you can't.
I can't tell you till
I
can't tell you till it works or it doesn't work.
I didn't want to tell Jules because honestly I was starting to feel the pressure. Time was ticking and I was coming up short. So in the famous words of Joe Strummer, cheat if you can't win. That's exactly what I was fixing on doing, on the low, behind the scenes. I was going to take extraordinary measures to succeed at any cost. What I did was I went to the YouTube full video of the championship game and went into the comments section. Sure enough, there were a couple people on there that said they were at the game. That's it. So I wrote to these randos. Mind you, these comments were like from 6 years ago. But wouldn't you know it, one of these guys wrote me back almost immediately. Said he'd be happy to talk about it. Wanted to know what the podcast was called, etc., etc. Well, I didn't want to put this new podcast on blast, so I tried to just tell him that we should talk offline and that he could write me at my email. And that's when I realized that YouTube has security measures for these type of interactions, and they blocked me from any further communication with Jay Garrison Go Utes 420. And now I had to find a way to break through YouTube's cyberwall. So I didn't want to mention any of this to Jules until I had it all figured out. Anyway, back to our conversation.
Have you learned some cool stuff?
No, not yet, because nobody knows about this. I mean, I know more about this basketball game than everybody else.
Booyah! Mike just texted and said he was finally free to talk. But first, let me give you some backstory.
I grew up in the same neighborhood, on the same block as Mike. And Mike, Candace, Keith, and Jason, and my sister and I are all still friends to this very day. We're all still tight. Most people don't have that in their life. And Mike was the most sports obsessed out of all the people in this group. Mike Clark was one of the main writers for the big hip-hop magazine in Seattle called The Flavor. And it's funny because Mike was allergic to grass, so we had to play football in the streets. And it was on the pavement, and the older kids would try to tackle us. We were just little kids just getting wrecked on the street. But that worked out for me because when I turned into a skateboarder, I was already used to just sliding across concrete and ripping my skin off. I was prepared for that. Where are you, Mike? Let me try him one more time.
Hold up now. That was Ernst pinging me. He had just woken up in Kathmandu.
Okay, I'm calling Ernst. I don't know what he's doing over there.
Yo.
You're in Kathmandu? You mean like Nepal Kathmandu or like...
That's the one. That's the only one I know of.
But you're in the Kathmandu.
The real one. We were teaching for a few days and then going to head out on the river today and then fly back through.
Okay. I have a quick question for you, and this is why I'm bothering you in Kathmandu. I've been asked to do this podcast.
I gave him the mission I had been presented.
Fucking Monahan bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why I'm calling you...
Because I'm your only friend who's ever played sports.
Wrong. The reason why I'm calling you is because the game took place in Salt Lake City.
And they had to be at the game, or they just had to watch the game on TV?
No. I mean, I could find somebody to watch the game, but they had to be at the game. They had to actually be there.
Yeah, the vast majority of the people that I know in Salt Lake are imports. They're not the born and raised.
That's the problem. We don't know any Mormons. We need to know more Mormons. Do you have any opinions before I get off the phone with you about this thing? Bird versus magic? Like, do you have anything to maybe add to this podcast? Oh, by the way, I'm recording you. I hope that's all right.
I know you're going to say something stupid like that. I mean, it's always magic, you know?
Yeah, you didn't like Larry Bird?
Nobody liked Larry Bird.
Yeah, because of the way he looked or just the way he played?
You're trying to trick me into say something offensive on your stupid fucking podcast. I'm just saying that nobody liked Larry Bird, and nobody liked the people that like Larry Bird.
This is true. And nobody likes anybody that likes Boston, so... But I did find out some stuff doing a little bit of Wikipedia research. He had to work as a garbage man during his college days. That's sort of cool. He was a garbage man.
All right, that's kind of core. Yeah, I'll give him that. I don't have strong feelings. I'm sure he's a great guy, but that mustache is just wrong.
He looked like everybody from the suburbs of Seattle. All those guys that were like 14 years old and already had a mustache. Those kids that listen to like, I don't know, rock music. That's what I think of when I think of Larry Bird.
Yeah, dude, it was all of Ron's Linwood buddies while we were skating.
Yeah, the North End dudes that would show up and their dream in life was to own a Camaro. And all right, well, I agree with you. Magic 100%. And no offense to Larry Bird, the garbage man. But he did have a broken thumb during the contest or whatever it's called. Do they call it contest? That's what we say in skateboarding. During the championship match.
During the basketball meet.
Yeah, the basketball hoopla.
Like when you look at some of those old highlights, like Bird was a crafty motherfucker though. So, I mean.
All right, so if you can think of anybody, please let me know. I have now 35 hours left before I have to find this person.
20 minutes before I hop on a bus for 2.5 hours to go get on the river. So send me a brief description and then I can forward that instead of having to think.
Okay, sounds good. I'll send it to you right now.
All right, brother man.
And you've been very, very helpful.
Don't fucking record and publish any of this nonsense. 6 a.m. I need to sleep and I'm halfway around the world. It's not fair.
No, I only put in stuff that makes you sound wickedly intelligent. Yeah. Thanks again.
Later.
All right, see ya.
Okay, that was Ernst, who at the time when he graduated from medical school in Salt Lake City was already damn near his AARP membership age. Really, I think he was legit the oldest person in the history of medicine to complete his medical doctorate. And right when I hung up with him, my friends Mark and Bailey were walking by. They're both from JA, Mark from Kingston, Bailey from the countryside. And they were helping us retile our bathroom floor because the shit was leaking down on the floor below us. Unlike every single other person we know in New York, they actually know how to fix and build things. So you're going to be hearing a lot of them drilling and sawing and busting up our bathroom in the background. When Mark was walking by, I asked him quickly if he knew anything about this famous matchup.
So basically, Mark, I'm on this podcast. It's called You Had to Be There, and I have to find somebody who was at a very famous basketball game that took place in 1979. Now, in 1979, where were you?
1979, I was in Jamaica.
You were in Jamaica?
Yeah.
Did people watch basketball there?
No.
All right, that's what I thought. So you don't know anybody who was at the NCAA championship match between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird?
No.
You know who Magic Johnson and Larry Bird are? You know who they? Okay,
who
so people in Jamaica knew who Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't know anybody who was in Salt Lake City watching that basketball game.
Nobody.
See, that's what I'm trying to get at. Nobody knows anybody who was at that game. And I have to find somebody. And they gave me 48 hours, and now 10 hours has passed, so I got like 38 hours.
You gotta get cracking, man.
Mark was right. Time was ticking into the future. I did indeed need to get cracking. Luckily, Michael Clark Sr., my ace in the hole, my childhood next-door neighbor, the most sports-savvy person I know, was ringing me up right then and there. And if anyone could help me find some old bona fide b-ball nut, someone talking about, "Aw man, you had to be there," someone who was actually at this ancient-ass historical championship, it was gonna be Mike, the Pacific Northwest's leading aficionado on all things sports-related.
What's up, man?
Oh yeah, now I got you on the phone.
Just like I've been doing with everybody else, I swiftly hit Mike to my challenge, how I needed to track down and interview someone who was at this legendary happening.
And that landmark event is the NCAA 1979 basketball championship where Magic Johnson destroyed the dreams of Larry Bird.
Yep.
Both you and I know very well that 1979, there was only one basketball championship that we cared about.
Exactly.
That was when the Seattle Supersonics destroyed the Washington Bullets 4-1. And
yes.
Our parents allowed us to skip school, and I think it was my mother drove us to the ticker tape parade, and we saw our heroes, Lenny Wilkins and gang, ride by in the cars. And if I recall correctly, that's still one of the best days of your entire life.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you don't understand the lengths I had to go to get my mom, because my mom would not let me miss school unless I was like bleeding out my eyes or I had a fever of like 105 or something crazy like that. And I begged, I cried. I said, your mom was going to take us. I said, you're going, keep us going. Please, can I go? Please, can I go? And then she finally just gave in. I don't know if you even remember this. You probably don't, but they won the championship on my sister's birthday. And the very next day, she got married.
Wow. That's the most eventful weekend of your entire life right there. Well, except for having kids and all that stuff. You know?
No, absolutely. And so my mom was on a high that whole weekend because our basketball team won the championship. Her daughter got married. And like I said, I just begged and begged and begged. And she finally gave in.
That's so amazing. I'm so happy we got to experience that as kids, because in a weird way, it gave us confidence and pride in where we came from, like nothing else ever did in our childhood.
No,
like looking back now, I absolutely feel like we had one of the most profound communities that we could have grown up in. That at the time we were like kids, we weren't impressed with anything. But anyway, going to that parade, it was like, I don't know, it gave us a pride in something that it made us feel like we were on the map.
You know, before that, we were watching other teams celebrate multiple championships. We were seeing, clips on the news of teams and, cities and their parades. And we just didn't know if we'd ever see one. It was just one of those things like, man, will we ever get to experience this?
But the reason why I'm calling...
So I did follow college basketball, but not real close. But that year, Magic was the person that everybody was talking about. And I do remember the anticipation for that championship game. Herbie, rest in peace, Noble, he was like the biggest Magic Johnson fan. So he had these Sports Illustrated covers and things like that in his room. And I was like, what is all the hype with this Magic Johnson guy, Urban Magic Johnson? Because my focus was really like primarily NBA basketball, and for us to get over our hangover of losing the championship the year before.
Yeah, exactly.
In 7 games.
Yeah.
So.
No, exactly. And for us, it was just Gus Williams and DJ and Downtown Freddie Brown and Slick Watts and all that. We could care less about anybody else. I don't know. Like, do you remember it at all? Like, Larry Bird.
Yeah, they were undefeated going into that game. And it was like a big thing because here's this young, charismatic Magic Johnson. And then Indiana, you know, where people consider basketball a religion, this guy named Larry Bird. And they just kind of made them out to be like almost like the equivalent of like Dr. J and George Gervin or something like that. Like back, you know what I mean? Like they're trying to, you know, make that like a little rivalry to some degree.
And it turned into a rivalry. It turned into like their entire career was a rivalry after that.
Oh, absolutely.
A friendly one, but it was still a rivalry. And let's be real, a lot of it was the media hyping it up because America loves nothing more than a black and white rivalry. And so
exactly. And you think about some of the other great matchups that there have been over the years. But yeah, that one was on a different level in terms of being hyped up, you know, black versus white without them coming out and saying it. But it was.
Yeah, they always say it with dog whistles. You can even hear like the announcing. Now that guy, you know, works hard and like, oh, what a gentleman, that Larry Bird, you know, like.
Right.
Just all these things that if you can read between the lines with even a second grade education, you're like, okay, they're talking some bullshit right there.
I almost wonder what the commentary would be like if social media was around back then, because a lot of people don't know. I mean, but his upbringing was pretty shitty. Like, I mean, he had some like a pretty fucked up father, if I remember correctly.
While he was playing NCAA top level basketball, he was so broke that he also had to work as a garbage man.
That sounds about right.
Which, I mean, you know, respect. I mean, that's like, I sort of started liking Larry Bird and his ugly mustache a little bit more right after I heard that.
Right, man. For real.
And also, I've called people, I was like, who do you know? I don't know a single person that was born and raised in Utah.
I don't either.
Not a single person.
Right. One thing to remember about that period of time, too, is that the only level of basketball that was in Utah was college basketball because the Jazz were still playing in New Orleans at that time.
Yeah, where they should still be.
I wish Utah would give up that fucking name. Like, it drives me crazy.
The Utah Jazz.
Jazz, yeah. They might as well be like Utah hip hop or something like that. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Bird was a bad motherfucker on the court. Like, it's interesting hearing how many of the black players had so much respect for Larry Bird. There's a clip of Xavier McDaniel. Told him exactly where he was going to be at on the court. And he said, I'm going to shoot the shot right here. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. This is what Larry Bird's telling him. Yeah. I'm going to get the ball, and I'm going to shoot it right here.
It was a tie game. They had the ball, and DJ was stalling the basketball. You know, Larry was kind of standing outside behind him, like denying him the ball. And they called a timeout. And he turned around and looked at me and said, I'm going to score right here on you. And I said, I know you will. I'll be ready.
And they said that he did it. Made it, won the game. Like, he used to talk shit like that. Like, Larry Bird can't take nothing away from his game.
That makes it more of an interesting story. Yeah. That's like, you know, otherwise it's just a lame version of Rocky. But this is Rocky with the soundtrack. It's like it actually has some soul in it. So it sort of like makes it more interesting. I'm still happy Magic won.
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody was like, that was like a moral victory for Black America and everything. You know what I mean? Like, we were like, yes. And then it didn't help that the very next year, which was Magic's rookie season, 79-80.
Yeah.
And as a rookie, they win the NBA championship. But Bird got Rookie of the Year. That kind of bothered Magic that he didn't get Rookie of the Year.
Yep.
And then they just had their battles throughout the 80s. And they were legendary. But, you know, Magic continued to come out on top of those as well.
You remember everything with this stuff. That's amazing. You're like an encyclopedia with this knowledge. Who needs Wikipedia when you can just call up your friend Mike?
Right.
And speaking of sports encyclopedias, Mike told me he had a connect in Seattle, some OG named Matthew McCullough, who knew even more about sports than he did. He was convinced this Matthew guy could definitely find someone who was at the 79 NCAA championship. And just the mere fact he said this guy knew even more than he did, that was enough to make my blood pressure mellow. This could be it, ladies and germs. My scromy Mike was not one for superlatives. So if he was confident about this McCullough guy, I was already considering this search party on its last dance. Flip on those ugly lights already, but check it out.
I could do this for hours, but
likewise,
I do have to find this guy, so I'm going to keep doing some more research.
And I'll let you know what I find out.
While Mike and I were tripping down memory lane, walking through the fog and reminiscing, something amazing happened. Ernst, the oldest medical school graduate of all time, texted me back and somewhat cryptically told me to hit up his buddy Tom Steele, someone I had also kicked it with back around the turn of the century. Tom was one of the producers on Tony Hawk's traveling circus show, Boom Boom Huck Jam, something like that, and I somehow got asked to MC at a couple of those East Coast stops. This was right after Tony Hawk had landed the 900 and the video game came out, so he was transitioning into a household name, and he basically turned into the Michael Jordan of skateboarding. Mega fame. These boom boom things were huge, and I think Tom maybe had to chew me out for cursing on the mic one too many times. Tony definitely did. Suffice to say, I didn't transition as smoothly from skateboarding being for nobodies to turning into a fun for the whole family type deal. Anyway, I didn't know where buzzing Tom would lead, but I was already on the call.
I'm in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica, been here for 10 years. We all knew each other, Ernst and Monahan, going into 99, 2000 from skateboarding. But Ernst and I go back to the free skiing, free ride world tour era, just a year or two before that, and did result in me living in Salt Lake City for a period of time in 2000 and also in 2012.
So you're part of the ski vagabond community that Ernst is also a member of.
Yes, I have my lifetime season pass of the Vagabond membership.
And because of that, you know people in Salt Lake City, and you said that you have an aunt who was maybe at the game?
Yes. So we have a group chat, a Salt Lake crew group chat, and Ernst threw up the bat signal and saying, like, Monahan's got this challenge going for a podcast that in the next 40 hours he needs to find a person that actually attended the 1979 NCAA championship game, and saw it go up. So I reached out to my aunt and uncle who went to the University of Utah in that era, and to my surprise, my aunt Joan Mills did attend the 1979 NCAA championship, the showdown of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson.
Wow.
Yes.
The Sycamores versus the Spartans. I know so much about this game now because I've been stressing all day long about how am I going to find somebody. And I've actually watched the entire thing on YouTube, and now I'm like, I'm in. I'm all in. And I was like, but I'm going to fail because there's no way I'm going to find somebody that was at this game. I was looking at the crowd. They look like a bunch of dudes that listen to Leonard Skinner and Foghat.
Turn it up, man.
Yeah, feathered hair and like little shit mustaches. And stuff. I was like, how am I going to find somebody? But this is so amazing. And I'm assuming Joan didn't look like one of those people. So do you think she went to school there at that time?
Yeah, so a young college student, Joan Mills, to chase powder in Utah, born and raised Boston girl. So oddly, there's even a wraparound connection that came back to Larry Bird. Who would have thunk? And
yeah, wow. Yeah.
She enjoys sports, loves live events, and, you know, a great member of the student body of the University of Utah, Go Utes. And yeah, she was in the Huntsman Center. Saw it go down.
I'm so excited to talk to her because I seriously thought I was going to fall flat on my face and just fail this thing miserably.
This is your moment to shine. The challenge has been accepted and you're going to come through.
So you think she's game to talk? I mean, like I said, I had 48 hours. The first day's gone now, so I'm like looking at what, 24 more hours? Or
sand in the hourglass is...
Yeah. But if I can speak to her tomorrow, I'm going to be way ahead of schedule. This is great.
I do have to share an anecdote that I hope you'll lean into, Monahan, because I'm pretty positive my timeline is correct here. But in also 1979, Denny and Joan's first date was, in fact, a Grateful Dead concert at Red Rocks just outside of Denver, Colorado. And I think it was the spring. So it would have been shortly after that game. And her girlfriend somehow connected with the band, and next thing you know, they have backstage passes, and she's standing on stage left watching Jerry Garcia just burn Red Rocks to the ground.
Does Bill Walton show up in this story?
He does. He was, honestly, if I recall her version correctly, Walton's at that show, also standing stage left with her on the deck.
No way. All right, so...
There's so much Celtic connection here, dude. It's insane.
She probably met Bill Walton and watched Bird and Magic duke it out.
All in the same rip.
Wow. Is she a deadhead?
She is, yeah. conservative, you know. I mean, she's a very liberal person, but she's not a deadhead to the umpteenth power.
She's not going to be on acid when I call her tomorrow, is what you're trying to tell me.
Not tomorrow. I'll link you up via text right now, man.
Ernst came through all the way from Kathmandu.
That's how Ernst does.
I really, really appreciate this. You're like a lifesaver.
Bro, pleasure. Like, absolute pleasure.
It was already well past midnight, but I knew I was going to sleep easy. A leviathan of weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Now all I had to do was wake up and get in touch with a deadhead ski bunny from the outskirts of Boston, presently residing somewhere in Utah. I set my alarm for 9 and was soon sawing Z's. I woke up around 10 o'clock in the morning, gave myself a stretch up and a morning yawn. Prepared, wrote down some notes because I couldn't take a shower as I waited for her time zone to reach a reasonable hour.
She's married to Tom's uncle Dennis, and she was actually, factually, in real life, present at the NCAA championship match of 1979, where Magic played against Bird, and she saw it with her own eyes, allegedly. So I'm going to call her up and make sure that this is true and complete my mission. Hopefully, fingers crossed. All right, here we go.
Hello?
Hi, is this Joan?
Yes, it is.
Hi, it's Monahan. How are you doing? So you are, in fact, the aunt of Tom, of my friend Tom Steele.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so before we get into the reason why I'm calling you, I wanted to hear a little bit about your story and who you are before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual event. Is that cool with you?
Sure.
All right, so your name is Joan Mills. You reside in Park City, is that correct?
Yes, I grew up outside of Boston.
Yep, grew up outside of Boston, and you're married to Tom's uncle Dennis. So you married into the family.
Yes.
Okay. So what brought you to Utah in the 70s?
I was a competitive freestyle skier from Mount Snow in Vermont, and I decided to look at schools, and Snowbird was opening. So I came here to go to school because they had a pretty good circuit in Utah. But then I skied powder, and after one event, I never did bumps again, and I just stayed for the powder.
Skiing on the East Coast is like a death wish. I don't know very much about skiing, but I've skied in the ice and I've skied in the powder once each time, and I know which one I would choose. So, wise decision. So you moved out for skiing, but you also went to
But I also went to college.
Yeah, okay.
I went to the University of Utah. I actually have 3 degrees from the University of Utah.
Wow, okay, great. And were you going to school right when you moved out, like right in the beginning? Or?
Yeah, I went to school from 72 to 76. I taught for 3 years and then started on my master's degree, and that was around 79. Let's see, I met my husband in 78. So, yeah, that was right when I was going to school. So I was working on my master's degree then.
What were you studying?
Well, my undergrad degree was English and Reading and Secondary Ed. Then I got a graduate degree in special ed. Then I got a postgraduate degree in school psych.
And did you use any of that stuff in your actual career?
Oh, yeah. I worked my whole career in education.
Okay, great.
And I retired in 2007. I did my 30 years and I was finished.
and now you can go and tackle the hills whenever you want.
That's exactly right.
That sounds great. Are you still like one of those alumni that wears the sweatshirts proudly?
Yeah, I feel like I got a great education there. And a lot of us moved away for a few years. And when everybody decided to have kids, they all moved back. So a lot of our college friends are still here.
So Utah appealed to you in more ways than one.
Yeah, everything except for the politics.
Let's set the scene for Utah back then in the late 70s and then get into the politics and the sort of differences between the transplants and the people who've been there since they were born.
Yeah. So I grew up Jewish and I moved to Utah, and they actually segregated us in the dorms on my floor by religion. So my roommate was from Highland Park, Chicago, and she also happened to be Jewish. So that was my first exposure to Utah when I moved to the dorms. Most of the people in the dorms, though, were from out of state. So it was very unrealistic for what was going on. And then when I started to go look for a job, when I finished school, it was still pretty conservative and it was hard to break in. An example would be when I started working in the schools, none of the dances for the kids were in the schools. They were all at the local, what they call ward houses or churches.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't Mormon, some of the kids got left out. So I got into alternative education for a while because I felt like there was a whole group of kids, high school kids, that weren't getting their needs met because they were sort of pushed aside because of the Mormon church a lot. And it wasn't to say that these weren't wonderful people. It's just sometimes the kids weren't allowed to hang with kids that weren't Mormon, things like that. So it really separated some of the kids.
That really does set the scene. That's very interesting. And it was just strictly the snow that drove you to go out there?
My mother's mother died when she was pretty young, and my mother had one older cousin, and she was someone who was very fashionable and in the fashion industry, and she traveled all over the world buying and selling clothes, and she met a gentleman from Salt Lake, and she ended up marrying him and moving here. But she was also my mother's sort of older cousin that brought my mother up. So when I decided to go to school out west, I looked at Colorado, I looked at Utah, and my parents really preferred that I was nearer to somebody that was related. So they preferred that I came here. So I did, even though it was what I wanted to do. I mean, I think they would have rather I stayed on the East Coast because I knew I would never go back. But also because I liked the school. I thought it was just an incredible place, and it just had a lot to offer.
And even with all those cultural differences, when you showed up, you still fell in love with the place. Was it strictly the draw of nature, or was it also the draw of certain people?
Well, the community, and I met a lot of great friends, and nobody really stayed in the dorms in those days after the first year. And I never actually went back to the East Coast. I worked on campus during the summers, and I spent a lot of time in that area and around the university. I actually started an organization called the Hedonist Society, and we had several hundred members, and we had parties every summer and things like that. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, we had a really good group of friends.
The Hedonist Society. All right. So let's get into it. Let's move into 1979. Let me first set the stage with what my challenge has been with this podcast. They've asked me, as the sort of guest host of this episode, to find somebody who was in the flesh at the 1979 NCAA championship game, the famous matchup between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird.
Yes.
And I'm still a bit in shock that I've tracked you down because...
It's one of my famous memories because I had to sleep out all night to get the tickets.
Oh, boy.
And that was the beginning of it.
It was something that you were willing to sleep outside to get tickets for.
Oh, yeah. When you're a student at the University of Utah, that's how you used to get tickets for the student section. You had to, but that was a big deal because, you know, the games were building. And so you couldn't get the tickets in advance. You had to go at a certain time. And I think that year I was still teaching school. So I think I still had to get up the next morning and go to work, if I remember. But I do have a little story about standing in line that sort of opened my eyes to Utah and living here, if you want to hear.
Yes, of course.
So I was waiting in line, and I think I was there with a guy friend of mine, but all I know is we were sitting there waiting for our tickets, and we were in pretty good shape, and there were these 4 guys behind us, and so we could hear everything they were saying. And 2 of them had just come back from Mormon missions in Scandinavia somewhere, and it opened my eyes to what actually possibly happens on these missions, because these guys were talking about how they would go and ring doorbells, and sometimes women would answer the door with no clothes on, and how this was one sexual experience for them after another while they were on their missions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, were they speaking about it in terms of that it was a sexual experience for them just by the mere sight of it, or were they invited inside? I'm like, what are you?
Oh, they were invited inside.
Okay.
Yes. So that was one of my fondest memories. The other is in the Huntsman Center in those days, you were allowed to smoke in that upper area where you walked around during intermission. And the thing I remember about that game right before it started is walking around, and in the Utah section, there'd be absolutely no one smoking because they don't smoke here. But you'd get around to like where DePaul was or Indiana, and people would be smoking. So it was just so weird to walk around the whole ring. And I think I did it a couple times that day, during intermissions and then also before the game started. And that was something I always remembered also, because it was one of the last times I ever remember being somewhere public where you could still smoke inside.
Well, I was going to ask some questions about who was actually in attendance and the breakdown of the type of people that were there, because it just from watching it on TV, it just looked like you were at a Foreigner Journey concert or whatever, a bunch of guys with like those like really bad sort of like half mustache kind of feathered hair and it just...
That was the style then, I think. It was sort of that late 70s disco scene.
It's interesting that there's a Utah section that they didn't smoke at. So was it primarily fans that had visited from other schools that were in the tournament? Or was it Utah people? Like who was in the audience?
Well, I've gone to a lot of these, but what was interesting about that one is this was before the Utes really had a huge student section. Now it's very large. And so where I was sitting was mostly students because I got the tickets because I was a student. At most of these games, there's a lot of locals, but there's also a lot of people that support each team. And one of my favorite things at these games is the school bands, because they're just outrageous. And some of the really small schools that come, they have these tremendous bands. And they'll come marching in from the top of the stadium. And that's sort of like the whole aura. The whole ambiance, everybody's so excited, and the students sections get really wound up at these games.
So the hype surrounding this great matchup between these two incredible players, you think you may have still gone to this?
This one, yes. This was a big deal that Magic and Larry were coming here.
Did you have a dog in the race? Did you prefer one of them over the other?
No, not particularly at the time.
No, you were just excited to see them
both play.
Were the tickets expensive?
No, I think in those days we got tickets for free. If you waited in line, so many tickets were free. So I think I didn't even pay for tickets.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because the student section, you didn't have to pay in those days.
Was the student section like way up in the bleachers, or was it like decent?
No, it's always in the same place in the stadium. It's sort of over near the band, down lower. And it went all the way up to the top.
Was March Madness already a big deal at this time? Or was this the game that sort of made it turn into a thing?
I would say this was the game that really made it. It sort of was a breaking point. I mean, over the years, we'd had semis or something like that here, but I know that game was a big game. It was just such a phenomenal game that it was the beginning of how popular the NCAA tournament became, because it was fairly easy to get tickets if we waited out. But after that, it wasn't that way in following years, because many years when I was teaching school, we would get tickets to the games, and it wasn't so easy.
You're one of the main places for the tournament stuff to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be here from March 19th to March 8th next year. So I know that periodically it's been here over the years.
So that arena, is that still the same arena that they use, or is... I heard that it's not like a huge arena, that it's pretty compact.
They built it down into the ground, so it's very steep, and a lot of it is below the ground. Like when you walk in on the concession level, and then you walk down to the seats, and there's just maybe a section or two above.
Okay, and was it always like that? Was it like that in 79?
Always. Yeah.
So it's like a steep kind of Grecian auditorium or something, looking down at the action. So you sat in the Utah section, the student section, and there's been people that have said that it was really loud in there at this particular
really
game.
loud.
It was like a rock concert almost.
Yeah. And they were really penning Larry Bird in a lot of the time, so it was really interesting to watch it, because even though I think he scored in the 20, maybe 27 points or something, but I just remember they would shut him down quite a bit because they figured out a way to close in around him. But to this day, I remember how outrageous some of the shots were that both Magic and Larry Bird were taking. Were incredible.
Yeah, I heard about the bird cage. They had a way to sort of trap him, double and triple teaming him, so he couldn't really operate the way that he usually did. So what else stands out in your memories at the event?
I know that there was a lot of talk that it was a racial game, but it really wasn't. I mean, there was nothing like that I heard going on during the game.
In the stadium, you're saying there wasn't a sense of any of that kind of tension and that people were just there as fans and enthusiastic for both players and both teams. But did you get a sense that the media might have been hyping it up a little bit?
I'd say a little bit. And, this was around the time Donnie and Marie were a few years before, and the Mormon church used to believe that blacks were direct descendants of Cain. So they were black because they were cursed. That was along the lines of what they thought, and they couldn't hold the priesthood. And then when Donnie and Marie became popular, the Osmonds, I remember them asking them on TV questions about it. And then there was a revelation from the church leader that blacks could now hold the priesthood. So that changed during the 70s. And so there was a shift in thinking here. And so I think somewhat the media was doing it up, but it's really a long time ago, so I can't remember that clearly, and I don't want to state that I do. So
yeah, no, of course. But that's a little bit country and a little bit rock and roll. So that's a bad Donnie and Marie joke. Yeah, I know that the church changed course a bit when Mormonism got brought into the spotlight because of the success of that show. And it's interesting that would be the thing that would force them to retract some of their earlier beliefs. I guess the rumor is that Dennis, your husband, he was thinking about going to this and he didn't, and you did go. And it turned out to be like this watershed landmark event. Do you ever rub it in his face a little bit?
No, but I think he wishes that he did go because he's the real basketball player.
Yeah. So you still remind him, though, or it's a sore spot, so you keep it to yourself?
I think I probably brought it up on the 40th anniversary, but not since then.
Okay.
I honestly don't know why he wasn't at that game.
Could it have been similar to the time that he skipped the second night of the Grateful Dead at Red Rocks concert when you got...
When I got to go on stage?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe if he was there, you wouldn't have gotten to go on stage. So it's like, who knows? Oh, and is it true that Bill Walton was also on stage that night with you at Red Rocks?
Yes, he was right next to me.
Wow, that comes around full circle.
For someone who didn't even want to suit up and play, Walton sure was clocking a lot of minutes in this game.
In fact, my husband was on the board at the YMCA, and he came to speak to the Y when we had a fundraiser here, and I reminded him, and then he proceeded to list every single Grateful Dead concert he was going to for the next year and wanted to know which ones I was going.
Yeah, that's a real deadhead right there. Like the underwear that certain people in your region wear, I'm sure that he has tie-dye underneath those suits when he's announcing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Anyway, is there anything else that you want to talk about that you remember from that time? Or
I just would encourage anybody, if you have never gone to an NCAA tournament, it is really worth going to, especially from some of the small schools show up. When you get the Butlers and the Murray States, and it's just like nothing you've ever been to. You don't even have to like basketball. It's just the whole ambiance. Everybody is just over the top excited for their teams. And it's real school spirit like you've never seen. I mean, I grew up in a town where my high school really didn't have a football team. And so for me to go to a college with that kind and then learn about all this, it's so exciting. I really encourage you to do it if you've never done it.
Well, that's a great little pitch for the sort of community that's built around the drama of a sporting event. That's really beautiful how you put that. And I think that's a great place to end. So again, thank you so much, Joan. This has been incredible to speak with you, and yeah, you've made me feel like a winner, so
I hope so.
All right,
thank you very
keep in
much.
touch, and I'll talk to you soon. All right,
have a nice day.
Take care.
Okay,
bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, there it is. I tracked somebody down who was at the NCAA 1979 championship match between Magic Johnson and Bird. Got it. I hope this thing recorded.
Hello?
Hey, Webb, it's Monahan.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, I thought that you two had stumped me and that I was going to completely fail in my mission to accomplish the task. and that I'd get severely depressed and feel demoted, whatever,
not a good phone caller.
My soul would have been crushed by my inability to do the simple thing of finding somebody at a basketball game in 1979. But I lucked out, and I was able to find somebody.
Who did you talk to?
Her name is Joan Mills. She was a top-level skier who was from the outskirts of Boston or something, somewhere on the East Coast, and she got a little taste of the powder, light, fluffy snow, and decided, I'm going there to go to school. And she was in graduate school during that year of 79, and she went to the actual game.
I'm not going to ask a bunch of questions, but it is so random and awesome as well. I have no clue how you found basically someone who went to school out there for the snow and ended up in a basketball game.
This whole mission, challenge, assignment, whatever you want to call it, it seemed to have shaped up pretty nicely. But there were still a few topics I wanted to wrap up a little neater. I wanted to call back my certified sports nut oldest buddy, Mike Clark, one more time. Luckily, he wasn't working, so he'd be easy to get on the horn. He's calling me. All right, here we go. Michael Clark.
What's up, sir? How you doing?
All right, I got you. We're still doing construction, so there might be some noise.
No worries.
But I wanted to talk to you, give you the debrief on everything I found out on this bird magic journey. But then the drilling from the bathroom really did come in hard. And honestly, I was rambling anyway. So let me just summarize and give you the short and quick of it. I told Mike that I did in fact find someone who was at the game. So mission accomplished. And I thanked him for sending me 30 other leads via his buddy, the OG, Matthew McCullough. And then we started getting into all the things we found out about Magic and Bird by way of our rabbit holing on the subject. How we learned that they both came from very hard-working blue-collar families, and how Bird definitely had it even harder in his upbringing. How Magic was skeptical of all the hype around Bird since Bird was from the sticks, so who was he really playing against? But then, when Magic actually saw Bird play in real life, it was immediate respect.
This dude named Larry Bird is for real. This is the baddest white dude I've ever seen in my life.
And Bird, he also came from a large family, but instead of wholesome kids, Bird's siblings were a gang of dirty little rugrat ruffians. The type of kids always trying to fight everyone, because, of course, life in their home wasn't so great. How their pops was a Korean war vet with major PTSD, back when nobody was talking about mental health. How even the mere mention of it would bring on major stigmatization. So that led to heavy drinking and the eventual breakup of the marriage. Deeper poverty with moms having to work till all hours of the night, all of which makes the whole thing of Bird having to be a garbage man while he's playing NCAA basketball all the more understandable. But then tragedy really strikes. It's when the father is about to be arrested for not paying child support, so he calls his ex-wife, Larry's mother Georgia, and tells her that she and the kids will be better off without him around. And he goes and he gets a gun, and he shoots himself in the head. That's the type of stuff Bird was dealing with as a teenager, on his way to becoming a world-renowned basketball player. So you can see why he's the stoic, let my plan speak for me type. Mike and I also talked about how Bird, to his credit, and always with as few words as possible, would shut down all the great white hope crap that the press was always trying to paste on him. How he felt it was incredibly disrespectful to all the black players in his life that taught him how to actually play the game. How he was well aware of how offensive the whole pigeonholing was. So yeah, while you could still criticize what Larry Bird symbolized, it was really through no fault of his own. How if we're going to be honest, our Bird dissing was perhaps slightly misplaced. How our reaction was more a criticism of the divisive narrative that a certain power structure always tries to spin, but that on a personal level, Bird wasn't a bad guy at all, at least not in this regard. And lastly, how Bird and Magic really pushed each other to be two of the greatest players that ever played the game, and how they both had this equally obsessive desire to win. That kind of competitive spirit, they both had it more than anybody else, and they needed each other to bring themselves to their best.
Yeah, I mean, that whole decade was about, they were pushing one another for a good, 11, 12 years. I mean,
yeah, it was obvious. They needed each other to elevate each other's game, but in doing so, they elevated the game, period. And that's sort of amazing. But I will say, the thing that really struck me the most out of all of this is there's a clip of them
both coming down the court on like a fast break when they were playing together on this Team USA thing before the NCAA championship match. The first time they played together and the only time they played together until Dream Team later. And it was amazing. And they moving into the paint and it's like, it's crowded. There's defense under the hoop. There's like 3 guys ready to try to stop him. And so Magic no-look passes to Bird in this beautiful like poetry, over his shoulder, no-look pass. And the D is like already posted up, ready to come in on Bird.
Yeah.
So Bird gets the rock and immediately knows that they're going to stop him on his drive. And as fast as he almost gets the ball, he like no-look passes it right back to Magic, who's in the open. And it's like no-look to no-look. And, and Magic gets it and just easily lays it in. And it's like one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. It would be top of highlight reels to this day. There's like a rhythm to it. It's grace in motion. And it made me think of like all this talk of rivalry and all this stuff. The greatest thing I saw out of all of this was when they were working together. And I was like, what if like in some other set of circumstances, if their story wasn't about the battle against one another, but it was what they accomplished together.
Oh God, man. Could you imagine if those two were on the same team?
Man, Magic Johnson played with a mission.
Larry Bird, one more impossible shot after the other.
A lot of guys can just score. A lot of guys can just rebound. A lot of guys can just make plays. We can do it all.
The way we played the game of basketball was exactly the same. That's why we hated each other.
You Had to Be There is a Hi Barr production, created by Hi Barr. Today's episode, 1979 NCAA Championship, Bird vs. Magic, was written and hosted by Monahan. Produced by Julia Thompson and Webb Barr. Associate producer, Teeny Lieberson. Story produced by Julia Thompson. Edit, sound mix, and engineering by Teeny Lieberson. Original score by Teeny Lieberson. Artwork created by Dylan Lathrop. Special thanks to our parents, friends, and to our chosen families. And most importantly, thank you to the artists who have inspired us, because they had to do it.